Hi, welcome back to Cardinal Talk with Charlie Schnell. Today we're going to be talking about character development and good sporting behavior. And our guest today is my dad, Tony Schnell. So, Dad, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your job and your coaching career?
Well, I've coached basketball over many age groups, boys and girls, for 25 years. I'm currently the boys varsity basketball coach at Highlands Latin School here in Louisville. It's a small school that has, for the last 10 years, participated in what's called the KCAA, the Kentucky Christian Athletic Association. They have now joined the KHSAA, which is Kentucky High School Athletic Association, which everyone's more familiar with. That's where most of your schools participate. It's a big step up for our program, but it's exciting. This is my I've just finished my fourth season as head coach, so it'll be our fifth season next year. I've had girls varsity basketball. I've had middle school boys, middle school girl, AAU boys, AAU girls basketball.
Cool. As a coach for so many years, one of the most important aspects in all of your players is their character.
Right.
And their character is made of compassion, their integrity, their fairness, and their good sporting behavior. As a coach, you've coached for so many different age groups, both male and female. Did you see a big difference in any of the character between any age groups or the genders?
You really found great character across both genders. I mean, obviously, as players were older, as you coached high school players, a little more maturity there, so you tended to see a little more character, a little more responsibility. I wouldn't say boys and girls are any different in those labels. I think it's a little different how you coach boys and girls, but no, definitely you'll see a lot of character, and you'll see a lot of fairness and understanding of life in general with the high schoolers.
Cool. For some of the players that do lack some character, one of the most common methods for helping with this is Banderas' social learning approach. Some common, the main three components for this are modeling or observational learning, reinforcement, and social comparison, where they kind of look at their peers for what to do. Have you used any of these methods in your coaching to help certain players develop?
Well, modeling and observational, I have often tried with different teams to encourage them to watch either college teams or even pro teams and watch how they play and watch how they handle themselves. But with both high school girls and high school boys, I've actually taken players to WNBA or NBA games and tried to sit and actually talk about various aspects of the game, but in a sense, model their conduct after what they see on the floor. I got to take them to college games too and do the same thing, and really look at what might be the captain of the team or the leader of the team and see how they're acting on the floor, see how they're communicating, see how they're being leaders on the floor. That helps a lot. A little strange twist is I've always encouraged my teams to watch the Olympic teams, because you generally have pro players, but they're being coached in a little more organized situation. And so what you'll see is some really exciting things with the Olympic teams with those pro athletes in a little bit more controlled environment. So I've always asked for that kind of observational tactic. And I think you said a little bit of fairness or the other character.
Reinforcement is mainly the other one.
Well, yeah, reinforcement. I mean, what I try to do is, help them not make the same mistake twice. There's a saying where you make me a new mistake, because a lot of times players can keep making the same mistake and they'll say, my bad, my fault. They're not trying to hide it. They understand what they did wrong, but really, really try to enforce the fact that, well, let's make a new mistake, and in order to do so, you're getting this drill right, or you're getting this talent right. So as they get it right, reinforce it. Say, that's a great job. We're not saying my bad about that anymore. Yeah. We're actually in a positive reinforcement, showing them what can be done. I'm not a big negative coach. I don't like to scream and yell a whole bunch. So I don't think it's very helpful to sit there and say run, run, run every time, as opposed to this is what you're doing wrong. Here's how you do it right. let's get that right, and then once we solve that one, let's make a new mistake, and then we'll fix that one too.
Yeah, that's really good. Aside from like character development, another really big thing in all players that varies from player to player is their moral reasoning. And this can start from level 1, where they think if they can get away with cheating or playing dirty, they'll do it. Level 2 is where it's like eye for an eye. They will, if someone else does it to them, they think it's fair to do it to the other player. Level 3, they just want other players to do what they would do to other players. So like they want to be treated the same as other players treat them. They want, and then the next level, the 4th level, is understanding just like the rules and following the rules. And then finally, the highest level is maximizing the interest for the group. So you don't care, you're not self-centered at all, and you're just trying to do the best for the group.
Okay. Well, why don't we take them by the ones, because you obviously know them a lot better than I do. And the first one, I think, is sort of the lowest level, and it's just I'm in it for myself, I think you said. Yeah, and you can, you've had some younger players, and you can tell that they're really just out there to get their own. Saw that a lot in AAU, especially on higher AAU teams. They're just there not necessarily for the team, but to sort of get to their own end. How am I going to be better so then I can advance myself? And the team is only secondary. And what you've got to do with those people is make them understand that, yeah, I think I'm in it for myself, but my ultimate goal is to be on another team, a better team. And if you're going to get to that ultimate goal, you've got to understand it's not just about you. It's about teamwork. And so if you see somebody who's thinking, yeah, it's really just about me, try to help them understand that as they go through life, it's never just going to be about them. It's always going to be how they interact with other people, how they interact with other players. So, in a basketball sense, if their ultimate goal is to be the best player they can be, they may think, well, I'm going to shoot every time and I'm going to do everything I can. But the reality is they're not going to be the best player they can be if they're not the best teammate they can be. Mm-hmm. And what was your second category with apologies? The second one was eye for an eye, I think you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that is very tempting on the basketball floor. Somebody hit me, so I'm going to hit them back. Somebody's trash talking me, so I'm going to trash talk them back. And what you've got to understand is try to be the better person. Both of those are against the rules of basketball. And so, if somebody's getting a little physical, maybe bring it to the attention of the referee, let your coach bring it to the attention of the referee, and let the referee handle it, as opposed to you retaliating, because that's only going to hurt your team. Mm-hmm. Because regardless of whether the first person got caught, sometimes the retaliator always gets caught, and you have a technical, and that's just, again, injurious to the team. And so learn that, yeah, the temptation might be to get even, but in sports and in basketball, the real goal is to win, and I win by not getting even, but by beating the person, being the bigger person. Let's let them get their technical fouls, let them foul out, and not let me be the one who sort of joins in the personal fouls or the technicals, which only hurt my team. Mm-hmm. And that was your next category, I think you said.
Treat others as you want to be treated.
And yeah, that's sort of the golden rule. And in a way, that's a great thing to do. Would you want to be that kind of player that's always being too physicals, hurting people, not respecting people? So in a way, that's a great category, and we always talk about with my teams is that you've got to respect your opponent. And if you don't respect your opponent, you may win the game, but you're not really, really winning. And a lot of times, if you don't respect your opponent, you're going to lose. Mm-hmm. And so, it's one thing to play a rival, be all fired up. I don't really like that team, but you've got to respect what they do. And if it's a great team, you got to respect every little thing that they do so that you're prepared to beat them. You're prepared to do the things to counter what they do well. Mm-hmm. And so that feeling of respecting your opponent is in a way doing to others as they'd have doing to you. You respect them, they respect you, and we have just a great basketball game, and we don't have a lot of the extraneous stuff that might go with it. Mm-hmm. And then the next category you said?
Is pretty much just understanding that the rules are there for a reason and following them, not really like going above and beyond.
Yeah, and I mean, basketball, definitely. You have to understand the rules. You have to understand what kind of conduct is allowed. You know, if I don't follow the rules, I'm putting my team in a bad position. If I don't set a screen correctly, I'm going to get called for a moving screen. Or if I don't get called for a moving screen, I'm still not setting my team up to score. If I don't understand physicality, where contact can be had and where contact can't, again, I may not put myself in the best position to score or defend, and I may not put myself in the best position to help the team win.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly understanding the rules and playing within the rules is going to let you help or let your team have a chance to win more so than a little going rogue. I may get away with this or that, but in the end, you're not going to get away with it for your team.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, was that the last one?
The fifth one is going above and beyond, maximizing the interest of the group, even if it means sacrificing like something for yourself.
Well, there's a big saying is it's amazing what a team can accomplish if nobody cares who gets the credit. And that's where you've got to understand that the ultimate goal is that the team do well. If I do well, then that helps the team do well. That helps the team win. And so the greater good is that let's all work together and let's all accomplish our goal, which is to win the game. Mm-hmm. And if we understand that we're all in it together, then the likelihood of success is much higher than if every man for themselves.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Have parents kind of a player ever gotten in the way of you trying to help them get up the moral reasoning levels?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big problem with parents who are kind of going against what you're coaching. You'll often see students or players, sometimes younger rather than older, constantly looking up in the stands at the parents instead of looking at their coach.
Yeah.
And all they're doing is listening to the parent tell them what the parent thinks is the right thing to do, which sometimes in a bad parenting situation may be you go get your points, you go get your rebounds, you go get everything for you, and they're not worried about what the ultimate team goal is.
Yeah.
Why didn't you shoot? Well, the play wasn't for me to shoot. The play was for me to set a screen to set somebody else up. And so then you can have a parent like that sort of teaching that. What you have to do is maybe have a conversation with the parent. I understand you want your son or your daughter to do the best they can do. But you have to understand that they'll only be the best they can be if they play within the context of the team and they learn how to play with their teammates. And you may be thinking you're helping them a little bit selfishly, but in the long run, you're not helping them. You're not helping them understand what it's like to be on a team, which will only help them later in life. So, you can have some parents who just run afoul of that, and all we try to do is say, you're looking at the coach when you're on the playing floor. You're not staring up looking at your father or your mother. You're not having a little conversation with your father or your mother. Just an example for you, at Highlands, we had an opponent, and it was a pretty great player on the other team who was really struggling, and our team was beating him pretty bad, and the dad was constantly berating the player. And the player was sort of having an interchange with the father, yelling back and forth at each other on the floor, and the father would come out of the stands and point at the son and yell at him, and the son would yell back. And so the other coach was kind of letting this happen, and that's the worst thing that could possibly happen. Yeah. The player needs to be interacting with his coach and his teammates and not worrying about what mom or dad's saying and not having sort of this interaction. So if a parent like that, you got to sit them down, make them understand you want what's best for your player. So let's work toward that goal, and what you're doing is not really helping that. And I've had some doozies, but that's how you try to handle it.
Yeah, awesome. So do you, outside of like having a coach, having a role model, do you think just participating in sports can help like people develop character and moral reasoning on their own?
Oh, absolutely. Sports definitely builds character, and there are so many life lessons in participating in sports, and particularly team sports, because you're forcing yourself to have to work together with other persons for a common goal. And it teaches you respect, it teaches you camaraderie, it teaches you passion, and it teaches you understanding that it's just not me, but what I do can affect somebody else. So I think sports, having coached so long, is one of the best ways to build character. I mean, some of the best memories players are going to have is the experiences they had on those sports teams and the friendships they made and the wins and the losses and just all of it together, and then knowing to take those lessons that they had on that team and then be able to work together with others when they get into their careers as they get older.
And then have you, as a coach, do you think developed more character just being around the kids playing the sports?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even as you get older like me, you're constantly learning. You're constantly learning from other coaches, but you're constantly learning from your players. And seeing how those players respond to adversity, how they respond to being driven to play hard, only makes me want to work harder. When I see how hard a player goes on the floor and plays to exhaustion and just tries so hard to do everything you've taught them, it only teaches you more to keep that passion, to keep that drive. And I've had plenty of players who've even come up to me, and I'll throw a coaching slogan back at me, which is I'll say, maybe be mad at a player for doing this little thing on the floor, and they'll come back and say to me what I always say to them, which is good play, bad play, next play. You make a good play, you make a bad play, you've got to make the next play. I mean, in basketball particularly, it's always turning and changing in a game. And sometimes I'll be with a player, and I've had a couple players say, next play, coach. I mean, that's throwing it back at me, but that's how I'm learning too from players.
Yeah.
So,
outside of like developing character, something that happens on normally more higher level teams than lower level teams is bullying and hazing. What's one thing that you try to do with your teams to stop that from happening and form more of a cohesive unit for your team?
Team bonding can help a lot. I mean, you have sort of general cliques and general issues, and then you might have some specific bullying and specific hazing. If you have specific bullying and specific hazing, you've just got to deal with that player right away. And it may take some discipline to take care of that. They may need to be dismissed from the team. You may need to get the parents involved. And that can happen a little bit more so maybe in the middle school level than I've seen in the high school level. With the high school teams, everybody's trying out for a team. They kind of know they're in it for the common good, and you don't have a lot of those issues. But you can have cliques or different groups of a team, different little social groups within a team. I saw that sometimes with the girls more so than the boys, but what I always tried to do was do some team bonding work. And what can we do to get together, to work together as a team, and maybe sort of get away from those little cliques or this group and that group, or the seniors and the freshmen. And so one thing I've done with a lot of teams is have a little silly thing where they'd actually have to prepare their own dinner. The entire team has to come together. We let them cook at our house, and they have to plan the menu. And they have to plan, the appetizer, the dinner, the dessert, the drinks, and every single player has a role. And they can't just order pizza. If they want to do a pizza, they're going to make the pizza. They're going to bake the pizza. If they're one group, if they want to grill some steaks, they're going to grill the steaks. And so that sort of forces them to come together and actually work together. Here's the meal plan. You're doing this, you're doing that, and they're working together for a common goal. I've had a few teams where we'll do some community projects. Used to coach at Whitfield Academy in town. We actually took their teams a couple of times to the St. Anthony's mission at Christmas time and worked the Christmas party for some of the children in a little bit of a poorer neighborhood. And that kind of community service working together is a good bonding element. And, like I said earlier when we talked about showing by, I'm drawing a blank, but showing by sort of watching examples. We'll go to a college game together or go to an NBA game together. The Highlander team has had a lot of fun watching NBA All-Star Saturday Night, which you as my son know that I enjoy quite a bit. And so that's been a kind of a team bonding for us too. So.
Yeah, awesome. And then one final question. What would you say is the biggest like example of a bad sportsmanship play that you've been coaching for, and how did you react to it?
Well, and I guess it's fair to say you'll know what I'm talking about. I was coaching your team, and had a player that was a really talented player, but he just had a little bit of an attitude. It may have been a little bit of the parenting issue that we've talked about, and he just had a little bit of a temper, and maybe a little bit of a racial undertone. But we were at a game, and we were playing an AAU game. And there was an African American referee who I knew very well from all my coaching years. And it was a summer game, so he wasn't taking it as serious. And he came up to me and said, "Coach, you might want to talk to your one player because he's making a few slurs at me. It's a summer game. I don't want to give him a technical in a summer game." And that same player, I think in the very next game where we had a the team we lost to a very talented team. I think we lost by 20 or so, and we were in the handshake line after the game, and up ahead in the line, and there was a little bit of a scuffle, and maybe a little bit of a racial incident had occurred. And what you have to do with that player is you have to pull him aside and tell him that conduct is simply not acceptable, and understand that if it occurs again, that you're off the team. And not even just off the team, but if you have a way to deal with the parents and say, what's going on is not acceptable. But that's something you just have to nip in the bud. But that's an extreme example, but that was an example of a player with an attitude with sort of bad conduct that really put his teammates and everybody else and the reputation of his school in jeopardy by just some stupid activity. And you just got to pull them aside and say enough, and that's the end of it. And if it ever happens again, you won't be back on the team.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your insight and all your answers. And this was Character Development and Good Sporting Behavior. I'm Charlie Schnell. Thank you.
Thank you.